3 years ago, primary head teacher Mary MacDonald was falsely accused by parents of slapping a child in her school. While completely exonerated, she still has anxieties over what might be held on file.
Is my false accusation on a record somewhere, just in case I'm accused again? And then they'll put 2 and 2 together. Now, I don't like that. I think that's appalling. And CRB checks, the Criminal Record Bureau checks, that's a major cause for concern for me.
The decision to record allegations, even if they're unproven, is at the discretion of local police chiefs. This lack of consistency is causing alarm.
You can get a very eager chief police officer who says, mud sticks. Put every accusation onto a CRB check. Now, if mine was on there and I went for another job, and a panel are looking at that and they're saying, oh, she had an accusation made against her 3 years ago, we'll maybe put that to one side, because I'm sure that's what will happen.
There's no doubt that a teacher with that sort of allegation, arguably a head teacher, as Board of Governors, when they're looking to employ somebody, 50-50, one or the other, this one's got a false allegation, well...
You made that up. You say there's no doubt. But there is doubt, because people are sensible, and they look at the allegation in the whole context.
I am not responsible for the decision-making the very difficult decision-making the police service have to make. Because on the one hand, they can be potentially accused of not revealing information if anything untoward were to happen in future. And then you of course have the cases where people are entirely innocent, but the police have got judgments to make about whether to reveal that information. Under the law, the legislation under which we operate, if the police decide that that information should be revealed to an employer, we have to reveal it to the employer and to the individual. Ultimately, of course, the employers still have to make that decision about whether to employ or not.
It wouldn't be so time-consuming or so expensive if it were just against these existing registers of people who have committed sex offences. It's because we're actually trawling through police records and soft data that it is such a cumbersome system.
Until we have a legal system which provides justice for children, which at the moment I'm afraid it doesn't, which is why the number of convictions is so low, although the amount of disclosures is increasing. More children are talking about abuse, it's being investigated, they are being believed by social workers and the police, but still they don't get convicted in court.
Should there just be a guideline, yes we accept soft evidence, or no we don't?
I think it should be clear, no we don't. Would you like it if you were accused of something like that? How would you feel? You're asking me how I feel. I think I've made it clear. It's the worst thing that ever happened in my career. But I think what it can affect more than anything is your own personal life, as well as your job prospects. Unless you're accused, you've no idea what that does to your personal life.
In a statement, the Association of Chief Police Officers told us individual forces take a judgment on what information they place on CRB forms based on each individual case. In making their judgment, forces draw on Home Office advice. So if an allegation were to accompany a candidate's application, how much of a barrier would it really be?
Do you think that sort of false allegation that's been proven to be false should appear on a CRB check or not?
No, I don't think it should do, but if it did, you would have to question it and see whether it was false or not.
I think the danger is you don't know if it's unfounded. And also, we don't tend to employ teachers or any other members of staff come to that unless they've had a successful CRB check in the first place. I think it would depend on the nature of the allegation, to be quite frank.
A false allegation appearing on a CRB check would not deter me or influence me from appointing that person.
Including soft evidence divides opinion. Some argue there's no smoke without fire. Others say it renders meaningless the idea of innocent till proven guilty. So what's the way forward?
Because we see that happening, it's an issue that we've opened discussions with Home Office colleagues about and other government departments, and indeed the police service.
Is there a willingness there to deal with this false allegation issue?
There's certainly a willingness to look at it, and if that needs something doing about it, then I'm sure that things will happen. But we have to think about what might those things be. And in this instance, I'm homing in on whether the police service in particular need any additional guidance.
I'm more fortunate than some heads. That didn't go into my CRB. But I am happy to do a yearly CRB on myself to see if just somehow, with the change of a CPO, if that changes for me.
In addition to the mechanical process of the CRB checks, there are ethical issues associated with disclosures.
What is it saying more about our society as a whole, about what has been our cultural shift? And to me, what it says is that this police check sits more firmly into the fact that these days we fear and mistrust ourselves and each other much more. Why should people who want to help in their community and want to particularly help vulnerable people or children be police checked as if they are somehow criminal? Why are we beginning to treat people like that?
But we are saying, are we not as a society, that everybody is guilty until they've got that piece of paper, until they've been through the checking process?
No, we're saying this is your driving licence for working with children. This is the bit of paper that says, yeah, you can work with children.
But until you've got that, you are an unsafe adult. You have been, albeit not through a legal process, you have been convicted in a sense because you don't have that piece of paper that exonerates you, or at least gives you the right to work with children.
It's a qualification. That's all it is. It's a qualification. I am qualified to be a trustee of the NSPCC and a president of Childline. Part of my qualification is that I've been checked to see if I've got criminal convictions. That's fine. I would expect that. You know, if I go out in my car, I would expect someone to say, have you got a driving licence? It's fine.
Whether you've got that piece of paper in your hand in the first place can depend on how long you've been in the job. There's no requirement to check staff in place prior to 2002. This potentially leaves thousands of teachers without a disclosure. Bristol is one local authority taking a lead in closing this loophole. It's not just retrospectively checking staff, but continuously vetting them every 5 years.
There was general agreement that was the right thing to do in terms of our responsibility to safeguard children. Clearly individual members of staff may have concerns about having a recheck, but in general we haven't experienced any difficulties with staff cooperating in that process.
The staff of Briarwood Special School are some of the teachers who've gone through the process.
We're still going through some of the people who weren't checked originally, like me, and I have been recently. But we shall arrive at a point where all staff have been checked and are then checked automatically every 5 years. I think if you approve of it as a principle, that actually, yes, that's very important. Otherwise, checking somebody once in their lifetime might be regarded as enough, and it obviously isn't.
Just because you've been doing it for a long time doesn't necessarily mean you're really good at it or that you're safe to be around these students. I think that's the most important part about it, looking at the teachers that have been, or staff that have been working with these kids for a long time.
I think I'd worry about staff who were concerned about being looked into because they shouldn't have anything to hide. I mean, my priority, frankly, is the pupils. So if staff have issues around being checked, then perhaps they should do a job where they're not working with vulnerable children.
A decent head teacher, a decent teacher would wish to say, right, to their school, it's not obligatory, but I want you to have the confidence of knowing that I've been properly vetted, particularly if I'm asking my new staff to go through the same process.
The CRB process is essentially an administrative one, but critics would argue that by going down the box-ticking route, what we're actually doing is damaging our ability to make human-to-human judgments.
If somebody has committed sex offences against children, then it is sensible to know that and not want to employ them. But the way that we run it at the moment is that we collect a vast amount more data than that, which is irrelevant to that judgment. And so it obscures the person's ability to make a good judgment.
It's suddenly seen as somehow a we need to be suspicious about that person. And the only way that we can tick that person off our kind of suspicious radar is to get a CRB check.
The real safeguard for children in school is the deep knowledge that head teachers and others have of those people working in those schools. And by and large, that knowledge is pretty safe and secure. Now, we know that in the past there have been a couple of horrendous exceptions to that, which is why CRB checking, the mechanical backup, needs to be there.
The need for vigilance post-CRB check was seen at Sandy Lane School in Monmouthshire. Benjamin Warner was struck off the teaching register after being found guilty of pinning a 5-year-old against a wall and shutting 3 others in a store cupboard.
The teacher was observed teaching as part of the appointment process, and then the CRB check was asked for once the appointment had been made. That came back with no problems, as did the references. But as with any teacher coming into a school, I'd always want to make sure they were well supported and that the children were comfortable with the teacher was comfortable with the children.
It was the watchfulness of the school staff which brought Mr Warner's behaviour to light, not the CRB. So do they still have faith in the system?
I still think it's a very important process. It's something I wouldn't want to be without. It is a lot of work, but it gives a lot of people peace of mind. But it isn't the be-all and end-all.
The most important check is that gut feeling you've got for somebody, based on, of course, the evidence that you've got through the CRB check. And I think those two things together make a very formidable barrier to anybody wanting to enter the school system for purposes other than education.
The CRB is, at the end of the day, is just a piece of paper that shows that nothing's happened in the past, but I think we've always got to be vigilant in school because circumstances can change.
I think it's part of being risk averse. It's avoiding blame by saying the way to make the school safe is to do the vetting, and as long as we've done the vetting, then you can't blame us for anything that goes on. It's about protecting the adults, not about protecting the children.
So you think that CRB gives more protection to adults than it does to children?
Yes.
How?
Because it allows the school teacher to say, well, I've done the CRB check, so if anything goes wrong now, it's not my fault, mate. I've done my bit.
So after 5 years of the CRB disclosure process, what's been the impact? And are our children safer?
I think it's flawed in certain areas, i.e. that false accusations are kept on record just in case it comes up again. But I think it's the best system we've had ever.
If it just cuts down one incident in 10, 20 years, it makes children safer.
Young people, for starters, won't learn what it is to make decisions and make judgments about a risky situation or an unrisky situation.
Most adults are safe. Most adults, if a child goes to them in distress, would want to help, not hurt. And so we're giving a very false message to children, and we're giving them a feeling that the world is more dangerous. There are a lot of dangers in the world, but we don't need to exaggerate them.
Convicted criminals cannot have sole access to children, vulnerable children, and as they once did. It's not foolproof. We need to improve it, but it's the best we got at the moment.